Hello, everyone. Time zones are hard because, yeah, I'm Irish and it's 2 a.m. right now. So you got these streams, they're really nice to do, and I'm so glad to be here with you guys.
Well, we're so happy that you're here with us. I'm so happy to have you. The only thing that you really get out of it is that when Amenthul felt the warmth from Azeroth and came and saw the horrors of the festering that was on Azeroth and him ripping out Yasiraj, the only thing you got is that a large pool of like life essence of the Titan poured out, and it was uncontrollable power that came out and bleeding, and they all had to work as a pantheon together to finally balance and heal it. I mean, it still stayed a wound, but it became this seething forth of power, and that's all you really kind of get out of it regarding with the pantheon and how they handled it. I would 100% agree with you on that. And there's I feel like not just Yasiraj's blood, because how I've seen it, I feel like it's been mixed around a little bit of where like not just Yasiraj was slightly wounded when he was ripped out, because like the old gods were kind of like an amalgamation of each other. So it could be a little bit of all of them. Also, Shirviu, turn up your mic just a little bit. Yeah, sure. So Shirview was talking a little bit about of when Amenthul ripped out Yasiraj. Do you guys feel that Yasiraj kind of bled into and mixed together some of his blood as well too? And that's also the result of creating such a massive amount of energy, or do you think it's generally just the lifeblood of Azeroth?
Um, I do think that some of Yasharaj's blood did end up in the world of eternity, but I do think that it is mostly the lifeblood of Azeroth that's sort of like pooled there.
I would think, yeah, definitely there is a bit in there. That one bit could be enough to do damage, but I don't think it would be enough to do some serious bad corruption. Like, I feel like Azeroth's blood would be able to protect itself, kind of like a scientific way.
Can you guys? Okay, you can hear me now. I'm sorry. Like Discord didn't know which mic I had plugged in, and that was totally my fault. So you missed my whole introduction, and I said Ishuna La Adventures, and you missed it.
Oh no.
Okay, I'm sorry for that rocky start, but hopefully you guys can hear me okay now. All I really said was, of course, we had the Titans, we had Amenthul, he pulls Yasharaj out, the wound allegedly creates the Well of Eternity, and we're kind of on the initial subject here. Is it purely Azeroth's blood, or was it Old God Taden from the start, being the wound Yasharaj left?
Well, do you think some of that power is not just blood itself, but it also describes it in even some books that are actually you can locate in the game, and it describes that it's connected to the elemental plane and even the Great Dark Beyond. And what if some of that power itself too is not just Azeroth itself, but an amalgamation of those two as well?
Yeah, and the Twisting Nether as well. And that connection to the Twisting Nether may or may not have been there at the start. But I think that when the Night Elves try and bring in Sargeras, that connection to the Twisting Nether is really changed in a lot of ways. I don't know if it was there at all from the start, but at this point, ever since they tried creating that portal, it's been like a gateway. And that rift has never properly been sealed. It basically imploded.
If I had to guess, I'd say it's still like existing at the bottom of the ocean, possibly like near where Shara's like built her little city of Nazajar.
You think where Zinajari probably sank?
Yeah, so like somewhere off the coast of Ashara, in the middle of the ocean there somewhere.
So they're
Well,
probably protecting it.
definitely. Or like um what I've come to find too is like, so Deathwing ultimately breaks out and is uses the maelstrom from the after effects of the Well of Eternity being destroyed and the after effects of it. He uses that to come out in the Cataclysm, but that's linked directly to Deepholm, which is a form of an elemental plane. We're going into a form of the elemental plane. So would that mean that there's a lot more going to it of like what exactly is Azeroth in your guys' opinion?
Possibly, maybe what the whole scrapped content of Cataclysm, like being on that topic, the underwater zones and stuff. Maybe that was more supposed to delve into that and explain to us that Azeroth just isn't Azeroth, and there is these many layers, but we never got to experience that.
Yeah, I've always personally interpreted it as Yasharaj extending all the way to the World Soul, from the World Soul pretty much all the way out to the surface of the world. And I would say that the rift that he made is the only true tunnel that we would have that would actually go all the way to the center of the world. I do believe that if we went down into the Well of Eternity, that it would actually go like all the way through the planet.
Almost kind of like a wormhole in itself, like as we see it swirling in the Well of Eternity instant in the Hour of Twilight. So that'd be really kind of amazing how is the multi-dimensional layer connecting all those things.
Yeah, and now that they made that portal, I'm honestly wondering if they pretty much pulled on Azeroth's power in order to make that portal to begin with, and that they wouldn't have been able to bring Sargeras in without the power of a Titan to do so. Or did you guys get a different opinion?
Hmm. I'm not entirely sure. To me, the portal was like always just disrupted, and then you never really hear anything of it else. So I'm on the fence as to whether or not the portal is actually like still active or not. I mean, I guess it still is when like Deathwing shattered the elemental planes by destroying the world pillar. But yeah, I don't know.
I think the whole purpose of it being called the Well of Eternity, and they really try to hammer home that subject if you read Dawn of the Aspects or the Well of Eternity series with the Demon Soul and the War of the Ancients. I think that it's trying to get across the message that is a wound that will never be repaired, and that we're always going to have to be dealing with the results of that. Even Chronicle calling it like a scar on all creation.
And
So-
it really was, because it was, we just had this traditional fauna and chaotic world to begin with, and it seeded this whole chain of events with how the trolls formed all the way into the highborn and the night elves and such, and the ultimate corruption and crassness from Ajara. So I mean, it's like a whole giant chain of events that unfolded.
I definitely think that the way that, if you guys have done the Well of Eternity dungeon that was available through the Caverns of Time and Cataclysm, they do also mention how it's almost like the Well of Eternity that was created by Yasharaj being ripped out. It's like the power, I don't know what exactly it is, but either the power of the world soul or the power of whatever old gaudy stuff is down there, or not exactly sure, but at that point, the original Well of Eternity that the Night Elves use, it's kind of sucking or it's kind of shooting power outwards. Like it's transforming everything around it. It's allowing people to draw power from it. It's a font, right? Like it's kind of expelling all of this energy. That's the impression I got. And I feel like that might have to do with the direction even that it's spinning. And they make it pretty clear in that dungeon with the dialogue that were provided that when Ajara and Xavius and all of those sorcerers try and do this magical ritual to bring Sargeras through, they kind of change how the well is configured, and the twisting nether changes it so that it's more of a like a suction kind of situation. And that's why in the end, when it that's why it implodes. It brings all the demons back in with it. I don't know if you guys have done that dungeon, but basically it's pretty oversimplified, but it spits all these demons out, you kill them, you stop the ritual, everything's fine and dandy, and then Manaroth and like all these demons get sucked back into the well, and it like swallows them back in before exploding, and we all like escape before it explodes. But I think that it's supposed to be showing this dichotomy of like sending power out and being this font of power and having all these, positive traits versus sucking in and then devouring on itself and exploding and damaging the planet.
Kind of like a sentient black hole, if you will, that's stationary.
Yeah, it's a reverse between sending energy out and then pulling it in. And I wonder to a degree what effect the dragon soul had on that whole process, being like hovering right above the well the entire time. And N'Zoth apparently is really intent on. I personally think that the whole creation of the dragon soul by Deathwing was N'Zoth's plan, and that N'Zoth is who orchestrated all of that being done to N'Zoth's ends. Like, I'm not sure what N'Zoth wanted the Dragon Soul to be used for, but I don't think it was simply a tool for Deathwing to defeat the other aspects with. I don't think it was simply a plot to weaken them and to give Deathwing power over everything else. I think that it had something specific to do with the well. And it does even mention in the books that at one point, Illidan gets the Dragon Soul, and he's thinking, he's working for Sargeras at this point. He's thinking, who's going to use it? Is Manaroth going to use the Dragon Soul? Am I going to use the Dragon Soul? And Sargeras' voice echoes out from the portal, and he's like, nah, I'm going to use it. And Sargeras actually uses the Dragon Soul, and like he can wield it from across the universe wherever he is. And to me, it just really shows that it had much like it was really impactful on the well. Like, I feel like in everything that happened with the well, the planet exploding, was potentially what N'Zoth might have intended all along.
kind of like creating that chaos, if you will, to let them do what they need to do.
Yeah, like they've intentionally caused the cataclysm. There's little arguing about that. Like it seems like Deathwing wanted to destroy the world in that way, and I think the shattering was likewise intentional. And that begs the question: was Yasharaj a target to be ripped out? Like, did he purposely make himself a target, hold on to that world soul, and purposely rupture the world? Like, were these three events intentional to try and to whatever the old gods are trying to do?
I would totally agree with you on that. And it's that that whole entire dragon soul is titanic, if you will, as well too, because since the dragons being made of things, I mean the well of eternity being the lifeblood of titans, it's this whole entire titan pantheon, if you will, of all these different things. And it makes you wonder, like, do the old gods just um really just want the power of the pantheon itself?
And I also kind of wonder if the old gods currently have control over the Well of Eternity. Because I saw some people in the comments, they're saying you think it's just Azeroth's lifeblood and it wasn't under old god, control from the start. That's fine. That's entirely possible. But what about now? Do you guys think, like, at this point, after the shattering, after the cataclysm, whatever remnant of the well, do you think there is a remnant, and do you think N'Zoth is manipulating that somehow through the Rift of Alm?
Quite possibly. I would 100% think so. And even possibly the new well that was made out of the vials from Illidan. Because I mean it was almost destroyed once again in this new Broken Shore with the Druid quest line. And they don't even rectify it of like how they refilled it and rectified that water. That's to be determined of how they were able to do that as well. So I honestly think even the Nordic new well is incorrupted of some way that we just don't know and it hasn't fully seeded out yet.
It's funny because all of the world trees are supposed to be these holy sites of purity and power and a positive, a boon on the world, something for the mortal races to use and to help them flourish. But in reality, they really are all over some kind of corruption, Nordrasil included. And it's, well, some kind of corruption. In all cases, old god corruption. But the only time we've really seen it all turn bad was Andrasil, which they couldn't save, and Teldrassil, which they did save. But, I mean, you could argue Archimonde attacking Nordrasil is another key point. In the War of the Ancients, Gahanir was obviously intentionally destroyed, but a lot of people kind of assume that the great trees were planted on top of Serenite, and Fandral, of course, turns out to have been a pawn. Was that all part of Yogg-Saron's plan, or the old god's plan to get into the dream?
Well, too, with like regarding like great trees once again, weren't all the trees that had the dragon aspects in it originally in vanilla? Wasn't that planted too by Fandral?
That had the dragon aspects in it? You mean the great
The
trees,
the
right?
dream, yeah, the different dream portals that were across Azeroth.
Yeah, he planted all of those intentionally on top of Serenite because he thought the tree would be able to purify that corruption. The reason I'm bringing this up, like, yeah, the trees are a bit of a tangent, but the Well of Eternity itself allegedly was tempered by Gahanir being planted so close to it in the dream. It was never, Gahanir never existed on physical Azeroth, but somehow Gahanir, like, it had the ability to kind of temper the Well of Eternity's waters and make it less chaotic. And so, for that same reason, Nordrasil is having that same effect on the mini well underneath in Hyjal. Nordrasil is actually tempering that water. It's the whole, like, nature and arcane balancing out that we see with the Arkandor, that we see with Cenarius being, well, really the whole druidism trying to cure that arcane, that highborn arcane dependency that the Night Elves had.
Right.
So basically, we've got these trees that are, all on top of some kind of corruption. the Well of Eternity underneath Nordrassil makes that tree special, and you can argue that's what really makes it a world tree, that it's so much stronger because of the Well of Eternity beneath it. But it's kind of an interesting relationship where if you took away the tree, if they burned it like the old gods wanted to, what would happen to that well? Would it become a font of really chaotic power like the dark Well of Eternity was? During the War of the Ancients, the Well of Eternity was actually like blackish green, as we saw in the dungeon, and
Yeah,
like
because they literally
sparkling.
abused it so much, didn't they?
Yeah, well, because you can argue it's like, oh, it's because they used it for evil, but we don't really know if that's all that was going on. They
I don't
clearly were
even.
doing something to the well.
I wouldn't think it was exactly like the form of like abusement of like they were doing something evil with it. I think that they are just so hungry for power that and all of that, and that they were just kept on sapping the energy from it, and it created making chaotic. Because I think it also what I've read on it is that it became so chaotic that dark, tumultuous storms formed around it too.
Yeah, it's like there was a dark miasma almost around that whole area. It was really corruptive and strong and powerful, and I feel like that's why Nazoth ends up making a deal with Ajara. He doesn't just make a deal with any random person and give them an entire new, like, transformed race like the Naga to lead. Like, he specifically, we know Ajara was strong enough to rival Sargeras in her eyes, at least, and that she blew away Manaroth. I mean, to give kind of a perspective, in Legion, we defeat Hakar the Houndmaster one-on-one as a hunter, and it took the combined efforts of Malfurion, Tyrande, and a bit of help from Cenarius to defeat him in the War of the Ancients. And you know how strong they are, right? So we're only kind of like at Hakar the Houndmaster level now for one-on-one, but Ajara is like they were nothing to her. Like she could have snapped her fingers and like killed them. They were even Sargeras says to Manaroth, like, you're nothing to her, like, because Manaroth is being arrogant. He's uh, like, you puny whelp, like, who are you talking to? And Sargeras has to tell him, like, dude, like, she's way over your level. You need to calm down. And for Nazoth to make a pact with her after the well explodes, it tells me that he wanted, well, I'm interpreting that as him wanting her knowledge of the well, and whatever she was doing with the well, like everything that she had learned to this point in her entire mastery over the well itself, I think he wanted to use that to his benefit.
Like he was like literally sitting there waiting for it to collapse into the ocean and her to accept the gift. Basically, it's just like, I've set you up, get in the palm of my hand.
Well, a lot of people don't realize that too, because it's always explained that she's like they're all being sucked to the bottom of the ocean, and their last chance, it's at this point that Nazoth contacts them, offers them a gift. They take the gift. It's their only, like, they had no choice. It was their only way of survival, so they took it. That's kind of the story that's being pushed on us, but if you read the actual books, and I haven't read all of them by any means, but Ajara has a nightmare before the well has even collapsed of herself beneath the sea as like the Naga queen, and there's Naga, and in the dream she doesn't know what Naga are, she doesn't know what that means, she doesn't know, she obviously has no clue that the well is going to explode and they're going to be sent to the bottom of the sea, but she has this nightmare. And I don't know who wakes her up, Lady Vash or somebody wakes her up, and she's like, oh, it was nothing, it was just a nightmare, like, carry about your business. Like, it doesn't phase her, or she doesn't show that it's phased her in any way, but clearly Nazoth had it all figured out.
He definitely did, and I find that quite amazing. And since we're on the topic of Ajara and the Nazoth and the whole well aspect, now let's talk about the restoration shaman weapon Shadrasil, because that was literally formed from the well itself, and builds to show that like it's pushing into the form of like her having control over the seas because that was gifted from Xavius. Now that's really interesting too, because that paves the way for was it the fact that she have the weapon before the well collapsing into the sea, or was this made after for her?
She was given it on her coronation by Xavius, and he basically told her that so long as she held the scepter, she would have nothing to fear. So basically, she walked around with the scepter. She created several temples with the scepter in hand. She imbued it with a drop of the Well of Eternity water, which made it then have full command over the waters of Azeroth. She so then when the well exploded or imploded and sucked everyone down into the water, she actually called on the scepter to save them. And so it gave them the ability to breathe underwater. And it kept them warm, but it couldn't save them completely from drowning. And so she calls out to the scepter to save them, but it couldn't. And then that's when she hears the other voice who makes her the bargain of like, hey, you know, like come serve me and I'll save you and your people. And that's when she takes that bargain.
That's incredible, because that basically shows the pre-notion of like that's literally pre-destiny of that happening to her, having water from the well, having control of the waters. She's like destined to be that and akin with N'Zoth. Like that's literally setting up of like that was her destiny within that weapon itself.
Yeah, I find it very curious that it was Xavius who gave it to her first and foremost, because before Xavius became like a pawn of Sargeras, I definitely think that he was like listening to the whispers of the old gods, because like we have him like ripping out his own eyeballs and replacing them with like rubies and all that sort of stuff prior to him being a servant of Sargeras. So yeah, I definitely think that it was all set up prior to the well exploding.
I would agree. Now, I haven't played a shaman in Legion. Does the quest line involving that staff, does it give any hints towards it being corrupted?
Pure water, wasn't it?
Not really. I mean, when you go to do the weapon, you go to the shear because it's under the control of the Naga, and so basically you go into it's not the Throne of the Tides, is it? Anyway, it's the dungeon in Kata that you go to that Neptune gets stolen away from at the end, and basically you go and fight the Naga, and then you just like sort of reclaim it from one of her sea witches, because once Shara became sort of like the queen of the Naga, she relied less and less on the scepter, and she would give it to her sea witches to take to the surface to wreak havoc on like the land walkers and all that sort of stuff. So that's why you go and attack this sea witch and take the scepter and the shield.
Okay, so I wonder if Xavius had something to do with them eventually ending up with N'Zoth. Because the way it's kind of narrated through Richard Knack's books, through the trilogy, from my understanding, Azara knows everything that's going on at all times. Apparently, she's super powerful and she has eyes everywhere and she knows. But she doesn't let on how much she knows, and she's playing the fool. And she's acting as though she's going along with all of Xavius' plans, and she's acting ignorant to Xavius, like Xavius is introducing all of these things to her and suggesting all these things and saying like, don't worry, I'll handle it, like I've got this, you know, I'll do the portal, you don't need to worry about anything, I'm over here. But there's always these points where Azara shows that she knows what's up, despite, you know, her playing the fool, playing the noble who's like the ditzy or whatever. She knows, like, literally everything that he's doing and everybody that he's talking to. So I wonder if Xavius is the kind of the mastermind there behind, working with the old gods and introduced it to her, or if she really knew a lot of it to begin with. Especially, for example, the fact that she refused to go to Hyjal. Like, why is that? Certain things like that. Her connection to Elune, her ability to see things, and of course the fact that she was born with those amber eyes. I think that Xavius is just a random sorcerer who happens to be close to Azshara and happens to have a lot of control and a lot of influence, and that he gives her the staff. He rips his eyes out. He ends up being the Nightmare Lord, servant of Sargeras, and servant of N'Zoth, a satyr. Like, he's working with both. I just wonder how much of it, like, she was puppeting, or if, who exactly had the reins.
You could think, since like Xavius was her trusted advisor, that he definitely had an orchestrated effect on everything, and because I'm pretty sure he took out his eyes long before any of this even unfolded too, and replaced them with the rubies and ebony, like Lhok stated earlier. And so, I mean, it is kind of like where he's gifting her this scepter that is a gift of the ocean, and his Zoth is in the ocean, and how the Well Eternity slips and the Dragon Soul being a part of it. I think it's a whole entire orchestrated event just to go to the higher cause of what either the old gods and possibly something even more um, being orchestrated together.
And Azshara's upbringing, like, there's no reason why she would become this deceptive, controlling, powerful, almost evil ruler. Like, there's nothing that she didn't have some evil master, as far as we know, through this process. Where did she learn to be conniving and to have this empire that controlled the entire planet? Like, why is that? Sure, she has the power of Elune, but we can see through Tyrande she didn't turn out the same way, so it's obviously not that alone. Um, there are even references that before Azshara's coronation, she was actually best friends with Elune. Like, she would walk along the shores of the Well of Eternity and she'd look in and see her own reflection in the well, and she'd talk to her reflection as though she was talking to Elune. She would walk along and pretend she was walking alongside Elune, and that was like she was Elune. I don't know, kind of nuts, um, and
It really
arrogant.
is.
But she tried to do everything that Elune wanted, and she tried to be, pious and pure and good, as far as we're told. And it's only from the day of her coronation she never talks to Elune again, and she completely changes.
Right.
So what's with that? It definitely seems to me like there's maybe somebody who's offered her a deal. I don't know if this was when Xavius first started his talks with whomever. Like, I don't know. We don't have all the details of how the story unfolded, but to me, there's a lot more to it than just Azshara acting all of her own accord with the well and what she does, and in controlling the world, and then it just happens to fall into the old god's plans.
Maybe now that we're on the topic of like Elune and how she was like destined to be intertwined with Elune, really fun fact, there is a book you can find in the game, and it's called, let me look at my notes, The Waking World and the Well of Eternity. You can find this in a tavern in Wetlands, Tanaris, and the Royal Library of Stormwind. Really interesting book. It's a very quick read, but it also states in there, and I find it always cool when I read it, that they believed and felt that Elune during the day was sleeping within the Well of Eternity and rose out in the night from the well. So like it was her little like basically like a little hammock that she was sleeping within, since we're on the topic of a loon within the well as well.
And I hate to say it, but with what I said before about Yasharaj being down there with the World Soul and spanning the entire crust of the planet out, and that the Well of Eternity is this tunnel right down to the World Soul, if that is how you choose to picture it, Azeroth was sleeping at the bottom of the well. So that's something to kind of throw in there, with Elune sleeping at the bottom of the well. The World Soul kind of was sleeping at the bottom of the well, let's be real.
Right. So, like, it makes you beg the question, if they saw a loon sleeping within the well during the day and rising at the night, what if that's just Azeroth herself and a loon is that personality? What if they're all intertwined?
There's definitely some kind of connection. I mean, obviously, Elune's always trying to get her servants to protect Azeroth. I'm not trying to make the assumption that Azeroth and Elune are the same. I'm not saying that. I think there's definitely more to it than that. But I'm just saying, you have to keep in mind when they're talking about Elune sleeping in the well, who do we know that's asleep? So there's definitely something going on there.
Right. I just found that interesting because, like, Azeroth is still sleeping, really. Honestly, she's in a nightmare, and during the day, a loon is asleep in the well. I find that highly ironic.
But then she's awake at night because that's when the moon is up.
Yeah.
And that's really why they started to associate Elune with the moon in the first place, was because they slept during the day. They tried to be awake when they had this power. They gained extra powers from the night, from Elune, imparting onto them. And as we can see, the Night Elves were astronomers, and the celestial alignments and things were important to them and powerful to them.
You also, in-game, as a Night Elf, you still get a buff at night. You can, like, run faster, you get, like, extra versatility or something from Elune.
Exactly. And as you know from real life, the moon in particular has powers over the waters. Like it controls through gravity, it's controlling the currents in a way. It controls what directions whirlpools and things kind of spin, like the Well of Eternity. Um, so I definitely think that it's no coincidence Azara, the one who's supposed to embody Elune, who was said to be her reincarnation or even to become her later in life, that she's ending up with control over the waters.
Also, with the scepter, she was able to enthrall sea giants as well.
Who specifically are Titan Keeper or Titan Forge, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was the giants, and then there was something else that she can control too, and I can't remember the name of it.
Wasn't it? Well, could she control elementals?
Basically anything residing in the sea she has control over, from what I've read.
And the rivers, yeah. Anything that has water, or as the Scepter book would say, the life-giving blood of Azeroth.
Right. The entire, I mean, I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but also, I mean, if you look in the first page of Chronicle, like before there's any text, like the cover page of Chronicle, we've got a map of the Pangaea of Azeroth with the Well of Eternity right in the middle. Or that that picture might actually be before the well, but if you look at one with the well, it's like they've intentionally included all of the rivers there, and that they're all kind of branching out from the well, that all of the water on Azeroth was flowing out from the well, or was connected to the well in some way, which is why water is imbued with mana and mana powers and things in the game. But they do also reference that in, Dawn of the Aspects, in Richard in Knack's books. the fact that at one point all of the rivers and all of the water on Azeroth was connected, or at some point would pass through the well. I mean, that aside, they didn't even need to go to that effort. I mean, we know with the way that rain works that it would all be intermixed anyway. But I think it's important to note that this azurite that's coming out of the ground, these crystals, sure, that might be the pure blood of Azeroth, but it's distilled. It's throughout all of the water, pretty much in the entire planet.
We can also see it in Hyjal, in the old, well, when you used to be able to get into past the invisible walls in vanilla or classic. You used to be able to get up to Hyjal, and you used to be able to go into the little well of eternity that they made up there, and it would silence you. So if you tried to swim all the way down the bottom, you would drown. But it says that, like, I think the buff is like, oh yeah, like remnant of the well of eternity or something like that.
Oh, wow.
And the way that the well is right underneath Nordrassil, and if you go down there now in current Hyjal, you can see the way the roots are specifically growing right around the well. It's not random. The roots aren't going all over the place. They're drinking from the well, like a vase or something. And that makes me wonder, when it rains, when the world trees are eating like nutrients from the soil, all of that. Obviously it isn't some kind of photosynthesis like you'd have in real life. Like, it's a magical take on things in WoW. And I feel like potentially they're pumping Azeroth's blood, and that they're taking, that azurite from the water or from the earth. And when you see, like, for example, in the Dreamway, if you're a druid, or even in the Emerald Nightmare raid to extent, when you're inside Shaladrasil, you can see that a lot of Shaladrasil's roots have become almost translucent, and that it's pumping this liquid through it. And I wonder if that's kind of like, if we tapped into those roots, what kind of water would that be? Like, it's or the sap. I feel like it would be really rich in azurite in the same way.
It makes you wonder, though, with some of the other trees like Teldrassil that used to be corrupted and it has been dispersed recently. It makes you think of, like, when things were originally and didn't have like a blessing and whatnot, and there was these seeds of corruption, and these animals drank from it, and maybe that's where that corruption seeded from, like, hence going into Darkshore and all these other places. Because yes, it was like a font of energy, but you can see that it had some form of manipulation on these people and sway, just for the taste and the hunger for that energy that came from it.
Yeah, that's another thing altogether with the azurite erupting at Darkshore. I wonder if that has anything to do with the plot with Teldrassil beyond the mortals fighting over it. I mean, specifically, Teldrassil's health as a tree, and that it's drinking kind of directly from the water, the ocean, unlike all the other world trees. And that this azurite is specifically really in large numbers popping out at Darkshore. I wonder if that is because, what if the world tree has actually drawn kind of that power to that area through its roots?
I wouldn't be surprised if it popped up either, because it is noted too that the roots of Teldrassil go all the way to Silithus, so where the sword has been, and it's been punctured, and the seat of where all of that azurite has been coagulating. So maybe it traveled with the roots or something, and something similar of that effect.
It begs the question, like, if they had vials of the Well of Eternity, and then they had an azurite crystal, are they pretty much the same? Like, what's the big difference? Because the way that Sylvanas reacts to Galliwix's Azurite scepter, and everyone keeps saying, oh, it's because she's an elf. Like, it's because she's familiar with that. She doesn't need to ask, like, Anduin, what is this? And she knows, potentially, what it could be if she's recognizing the feeling from maybe arcane sources from her time as an elf.
Exactly.
Well, yeah. I mean, the elves have like their night well, not their night wells, their moon wells, and that is like one of the ways that you make a moon well is you get a piece of moon rock and you combine that with water from the well of eternity. I'm not sure how many people would remember this, but Winner's Kitten, the quest in Felwood, you would so basically, if you were a horde player, you would get this quest from an undead called Winner, and she was, I think it was like Fell Blood or Fell Totem Post or something to that effect in Felwood, and she was doing research on the corrupted moonwells that the satyrs had been using to corrupt like the lands around them, and she asks you to go and like put her kitten in this like corrupted moonwell. It's like a green stuff everywhere. So you put the kitten in, and it turns into this big green and orange tiger, and then you take it back to her. And one of the things that I like always sort of like thought about was like how did they manage to corrupt like the moonwells, and how did they manage to corrupt the water when it's supposed to be like the pure sort of stuff. So going back to like the original thing with like the night elves and all that sort of stuff, so they know that like their moonwells and whatnot have the well of eternity water in them, even though they got cranky at Illidan for doing it, they wouldn't be able to survive without their moonwells. So yes, Sylvanas would know what Azurite is, or she could at least guess, because she would have been able to feel the arcane powers coming from it. She probably would be able to guess that it's similar in nature to Moonwell. So if you sort of backchain those sorts of like ideas, you could sort of potentially like come up with the idea that it's like complete and utter like arcane power from Azeroth due to like the Night Elves' history with the Well of Eternity.
Right. As well, I would imagine that the druids have a lot of rituals that they do with the night wells, as we see in the starter zone in Teldrassil. There's a lot of different rituals that they seem to be really heavy with their rituals and kind of taking care of the moon wells and taking care to make sure that nothing bad would happen to the water. I don't know what bad thing could happen, but they're clearly doing a lot, and I'm trying to say they're infusing it with nature power, but I mean it is on a world tree. So in the same way that Nordrassil is tempering the wells of that well beneath Nordrassil, I would say that the moon wells are a lot different than maybe we could say the Sunwell was before it was powered by Inaru, like the original Sunwell before the Lich King came. That arcane font would have probably been the most similar thing to the original well that we had at the time. And that's probably what Sylvanas would have been most familiar with, even beyond the Moonwells. I feel like the Sunwell that we have now is a lot different to the Sunwell of old that we haven't really had first-hand experience with. I'm assuming.
I think it's completely different. Granted, though, it is a byproduct of what's his name? Dathrumar, thank you. Him taking that vial from Illidan when he was prisoned underneath Hyjal. When he took that and created the Sunwell with it, I feel like it's only just a byproduct of it. Granted, yes, it is kind of like a small mini child of the Well of Eternity, but it has shaped and completely changed differently. And it's like, why did it change from what the original well was. What's is it the missing other components of the other two vials that Illidan used to make the one atop Nordrassil? Like, that's always what got me, is that I didn't feel that it was completely the same as the others.
Well, there's also the fact that I feel as though being a channel to the world soul, I keep reiterating that, but if the original well really did go that deep because of the tunnel which Yasharaj had made, Amenthul says himself he didn't realize Yasharaj was burrowed so deep and that it actually damaged the Titan itself when he pulled it out. So going off of that idea, the original well was directly being powered by Azeroth, or directly connected in some way, that when Illidan takes these vials and he goes and tries to make new wells, it's just not the same.
Well, now a really interesting thing too is when Amenthul pulled Yasiraj out of there, it wasn't just the Well of Eternity where it pulled up. That's, you also have Sholazar Basin, the what's the
Veil of
panda?
Eternal Blossoms.
Thank you. All those, there's things that pooled out of those areas too. And what's really interesting that I've read on it, and people even rumor about, is that people feel that once they've helped balance her wounds out and everything, that Freya got to work on life and balancing, and it created this new rebirth of life among Azeroth due to it, also with the help of Freya, of course, but also a lot of people think that the Silithid are a direct result from the Well of Eternity itself, too. What are your guys' take on that?
Yes. I think that the Silithid are a Kier that got hit with that blood when it originally coalesced in Ungoro and Sholazar, and that's why we see them there.
All right, cool. All right. I wanted to see what you guys thought of that, because like some people are like, why would bugs result out of such things? Absolutely not. But I don't find it very far-fetched, because things congregated, things evolved like the trolls, all this fauna and new life came from it, in a positive note too, because it literally brought about change of how Azeroth was as a life form due to that wound. It was a horrible thing that happened and it deeply wounded, but it brought about incredible change too. So there was bads and there was positives out of it.
I would venture to say that, as described in bits and pieces all over the place, there's no big good, overall description of this tale. But from gathering the bits and pieces, you can read between the lines and get the picture that when Yasharaj is pulled out, it's bloody, it's messy. He's like being physically ripped out. His heart comes out at some point. But it says that both the waters from the Well of Eternity, Azeroth's blood, and Yasharaj's blood are splashed across the planet, and pieces of him fall off all over the place. That's how it sometimes it's described in that detail, sometimes it's not, but that's how through the earth, just simply within the soil, this blood of both of them ends up dripping down and coalescing in the deep parts of the world, is what it says. Like, and it does give the examples, just like you guys are mentioning in chat, Ungoro, Sholazar, Veil of Eternal Blossoms. Because these are like craters, that's where all this blood is like kind of being amalgamated. And personally, I've always kind of thought that that's what those crystals are in Sholazar and Ungoro, because we specifically see that Freya had worked heavily in Ungoro and Sholazar. We do not see any any traces of her work in the Vale. Sure, the Vale had the same thing happen. I'm sure lots of things happened in the Vale. We have the what are those animals called?
The Celestials?
Yeah, we have the Celestials, but clearly Sholazar and Ungoro were worked upon differently, and they both share those crystals. They both have the Silithid, or I guess those dragonfly bugs as well that aren't necessarily considered Silithid, but they're clearly the exact same model. They're just good ones, like we see in A&R's place in Antorus, Lunaria. We see those little dragonflies, those little Silithid that apparently aren't bad, right? The same ones as in Sholazar. And what if, when this blood came to Ungoro and it came to Sholazar, what if Freya separated it and tried to, because you know how the Titans order things, they like to break everything up into its individual components, and what if that's what those crystals are? It's kind of like azurite that's been spliced into all of its different properties. Could you see that?
Definitely. Oh, are you talking about all the little gems that you collect and bring to those pylons, like in
Yeah,
Orangoro and stuff?
and they have it in
Yeah.
Sholazar too.
Oh yeah, with the pillars, the cultists blow up one of them in Shosla.
Right, because we can see that there's Watcher Sanctums in both places, Ungoro and Sholazar, and there's way gates in both places, and you can see there's a couple Titan keepers there, like not keepers but Titan Forge there. We can see clearly that Freya had worked there. I'm just a little iffy, although the veil it had the exact same properties and the blood affected it in the exact same way. I'm not entirely sure that Freya had a chance to go over and work on that. Maybe it would have turned out green and jungly like the rest of them had she, ordered it in that way after, I don't know, maybe she didn't really get a chance.
I can't remember the artifact. I think it might even be Fuzan. But it does mention that Freya does go down to the Vale of Eternal Blossoms, that she does talk to the Celestials and that sort of stuff. But yeah, it doesn't point to the fact that she worked there, but she certainly did know about it, and she did certainly talk to the Celestials, and I think it was on her sort of knowledge that they sealed the veil, but I could be completely wrong because I haven't actually done the weapon that has all those mentions in it. I've just sort of read about it.
I wonder if that's because of the Shah, and maybe that's why she didn't do the same thing as she did in the other two locations.
Now, since we're on the topic of Shah and Yasiraj being pulled out that resulted in that, now with the things pooling and coalescing in Sholazar Basin and all that too, from ripping him out because he was kind of all over Azeroth, do you think Il'gynoth is actually a remnant of Yasiraj then?
That's such a can of worms to open up.
I know.
I believe exactly what it says, that he's a pustule of N'Zoth, or the corrupted heart of N'Zoth, or Zaltas says something that he's part of N'Zoth. I'm sorry, the exact words escape me, but I kind of believe that. However, I think that the old gods are a hive mind to an extent, and I think they're working together heavily, and especially Yogg-Saron and N'Zoth. It's undebatable in my eyes that they're working in tandem in every single action. So I wouldn't be surprised if Il'gynoth is also representing Y'Shaarj in a way, but physically, I think it's N'Zoth.
He's the tumor.
Probably. Yeah, a little tumor of N'Zoth. I mean, here, let me throw an eyeball in a tree. Blech. Brilliant.
Just saying, the eyeball in the tree on the stained glass windows in Dal.
But I mean, just the reason this is kind of being brought up, I would imagine, Vaski, is because Il'gynoth is in Ungoro, and Ungoro is where the Well of Eternity blood spilled out with Y'Shaarj's blood. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if Il'gynoth is working off of whatever power of Y'Shaarj was still remaining in that area, in that tree. I'm sure that was probably used, but I think it's N'Zoth who's behind Il'gynoth specifically.
I'll definitely agree with you on that one. I just kind of wanted to slightly open some worms up and maybe toss them. We'll see what happens. See if we get bait out of it. And we did.
No baiting the chat.
Ah.
Well, before we go to our break, What do you guys think about the Well of Eternity going forward with BFA? We're going to be fighting Ajara in the second raid, apparently. Ajara had full mastery over the well. The well is her story. Like, the story of Ajara is all about that. I'm sure we're going to be learning things about the well that we would have never imagined. I hope. So, how do you guys think the well is kind of going to impact the story going forward? In the Azerite specifically? Do you think there's going to be any like mind blows that you're expecting?
I think we find out that the waters contain powers like similar to the Azerite. I feel like there's going to be a lot of draining of like moonwells and everything. Like I feel like everybody's going to be taking every opportunity they can to try and crystallize that stuff and take the power out of it. Or like I don't think there's going to be a lot of storyline, especially left with the Ajara part of the raid. Like she's going to have a link to the Well of Eternity in somehow because she did control it, and like our shamans had control of that scepter, and so obviously she's missing it now. So she doesn't have that power anymore. But if we have remnants of Azerite and she can identify that with the well, that that could evoke some lore speculation from her exactly.
Well, now that you say that people are going to be taking advantage of wells because it is technically the lifeblood of Azeroth, and what if like Azerite is something, but what if you can duplicate it in some way and take resources to make basically, like, for instance, people make faux gems. What about faux Azerite? What if we actually deplete those pools and take away from those pools, and that's a reason why we also lose connection with Elune itself too, because there's hints of that too with the lack of well from remnants of the Well of Eternity and whatnot, that might end up being an option, that we lose that connection itself too with Elune, with the Night Elves, not just in part with Teldrassil, but with everything that's going on with the lifeblood of Azeroth.
Well, there's already some hints that Sylvanas knows that the Moonwells are powerful. And what if we realize as a society that this Azerite is the Well of Eternity's power? And what if people go for Nordrassil to try and claim that power for themselves?
That's a big can of worms.
I I mean, at the same time, if we're all powering ourselves up with Azerite, and literally the entire world is Azerite crazy, and we're all using the power of Azerite for everything, there's a couple things that can happen. Are we going to be breaching into the Twisting Nether and calling Dreadlords after us, just like happened back in the old days? That's question number one. And then question number two I'd be asking is, Ajara knows everything about that power. Wouldn't she be the one person who would know our weakness if that's what we were employing?
I think that we could be having like the Well of Eternity, like 2.0 happen. Where is it? Where's my notes? In Chronicle, it mentions that the first Well of Eternity was an incandescent and shimmering lake of energy. As the Highborn's obsession with the well grew, they recklessly drew magic from its depths, throwing it into constant turmoil. Dark storms broke out over its surface, and its waters darkened until they became utterly black. Now, I think, or what would be pretty cool, is with all the Azerite popping up everywhere, and we're taking all of its power and all that sort of stuff, that what we saw or what was recorded as what was happening over the top of the Well of Eternity actually happens over the entire world. So you get that dark storms, the turmoiled water, the big sort of shake up happening there. Like that would be pretty cool.
Do you
So
think?
like the maelstrom itself causing like a hurricane of storms and such like that, like, and it really like creating like stormy chaos through the whole entire world.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Do you think if the old gods had burnt Nordrassil and that well's powers went out of control, do you think it would explode too?
Yes.
100%.
I was worried about that.
Yeah.
Because when you have a look at the older pictures of the Well of Eternity, so like in Zinashari, where like the moons were really close to the city and all that sort of stuff, and even in the Well of Eternity dungeon, there's like this little sort of like beacon, if you will, sitting out in the middle of the lake. In the picture of Zinashari, it's blue, but in the Well of Eternity dungeon, it's gold, and the dragon soul is sitting above it. So it makes me think that if Nordrassil wasn't there, there would be like that beacon sitting above the water, and that could possibly be what was calling in the cosmic energies of the Great Dark Beyond and all that sort of stuff. And when it sucked in too much, it would implode.
Yeah, I feel like the great trees have those portals to the dream because Ysera knew how to use the portals on the wells, and she chose to allow us to put those physical gateways to the dream. But that's not to say that they couldn't also be used as portals for other things. The well was used as a portal for Sargeras. Could the trees be used as portals for the old gods or for the void, the same way the Sunwell brings those void creatures in when Illyria shows up? I'm kind of worried about Hyjal. Like, Nordrassil there's so many implications, so many good things that's coming out of it, but it has equal risks for what insidious plots that Malfurion could catch on to and be a part of.
Or he's already the mastermind behind them anyway.
Right? Oh my
Poor
god.
Malfurion. Tyrande, my love. He might actually just be a good guy.
He might. Or we can be like Nixium and he's a Dreadlord.
Well, he knows
Or
exactly
Sith,
what he's doing.
whatever.
I mean, even in Wolfheart, it references he knows when binding corruptions to Teldrassil, he knows it's not going to actually be wiped until it's gone from the Rift of On too. And then what does he do when we go in there? He just goes, we'll take care of it later. Like, he knows exactly what he's doing. He knows he's just pushing it off and it's never going to go. He's just literally letting his work pile up. Like, why did we give him the job if he's not going to do it?
Had one job, Malf. One job.
Speaking of which, since we're still on the topic of the Well of Eternity, I'm actually going to send a link in the chat for you guys too. There's an hour-long machinima of the Well of Eternity, and it does a great justice explaining the whole entire story and going into the War of the Ancients. So I'll gladly share with that. If you guys haven't seen it, you guys can click the link and check it out later.
I highly recommend that Machinima. It took them 3.5 years to do. If you guys haven't read the first book in Richard Knack's trilogy, it basically talks about the events of the first book. You can see Ajara actually talking, which no offense to anyone watching, but I almost get the impression sometimes that a lot of players see Ajara as this mysterious historical figure that's never talked. And it's like, no, like, we get some pretty good insight into what she was like from her own mouth. But yeah, I find some time and watch that full thing. It's amazing.
Yeah, they put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into that. It's amazing and beautiful. They did a wonderful job.
Did you guys want to do our intermission now then?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're going to take about a 12-minute break. I'm just going to play some music. We don't have any fancy videos to watch this time for intermission, so feel free to just, come back in about 10 minutes. And we'll be talking about the dragon aspects for another hour-ish. See ya soon. everybody, welcome back. Sorry we didn't have a video for that intermission. If you guys have any feedback on like how you think we should be doing intermissions with music or, let us know. We do have a Discord for anybody who's not aware. We're kind of chatting in there most days, pretty much every day, about lore and stuff. And yeah, if you want to, leave us a suggestion in there, that would be good. But now we're going to move on to topic number 2, the dragon aspects. They're going to be super important coming up. The whole 5 keys, 5 torches thing people have been talking a lot about. I feel like that's the main the player base's main idea with the dragons right now. Is all seems to be revolving around that. But we wanted to start off kind of by going through each of the dragons and kind of explaining what we think about them, where we think they're going to be relevant. The original ones, I suppose, and then get into Calic, the newest member of the family. So did you guys want to start off with the Red Dragonflight with Alexstrasza the Lifebinder?
Sounds good to me.
Sure.
Okay, so my opinions about Alexstrasza. She's kind of she's known as the Dragon Queen. If you see Emmenthul as like a high father, Alexstrasza is almost kind of like the closest to a leader, I feel, for the Wyrmrest Accord. They don't have a true leader. N'Zoth often tells Deathwing he should become the leader, and that they do need somebody at the head, but really, I feel like Alexstrasza, everybody respects her, everybody knows the pain that she's been through, and for that reason, I feel like they really look up to Alexstrasza. And really, if it weren't for Alexstrasza, I don't think that they would have defeated Galakrond in the first place and become aspects. Like, she was really an integral part to them all working together as a team, and for them all having this vision to defend Azeroth in the first place.
Yeah, she really is this like binding force with all of the other dragonflights, which I really love because I mean, she's technically like she represents one of the primary colors. So I find that interesting too for the sake of that with red.
Yeah, it's kind of like how the Pantheon regard Aenar, to be honest. She's kind of like the hope and the harmony, and she loves creation so much that it inspires the others. And I feel like Alexstrasza is much the same way. Now, it's interesting to note, of course, Alexstrasza and Ysera were both empowered by Aenar, but even before their titanic empowerment, they were still very similar to the dragons that we know today. Back in their proto-drake states, they had a lot of the same characteristics. And Ysera actually was this coward. She really didn't want to do anything. She was pretty useless overall. And it's really Alexstrasza that, brought her along and defended her sister and brought out the best in Ysera and made her useful. And Alexstrasza is kind of like a natural born leader, if you will.
Yeah. Even when described, she's called a natural born leader in her proto Drake dragon phase. And she really does have that like aura around her that she is this great binding force, as Vaski said. Like, she makes the whole aspects go on. And honestly, I think she's what's keeping it together too, because she just knows how to keep people together from her own struggles.
I mean, what's amazing with her too is like she really never even gave up on Neltharion either until like the very binding moment. She was always wondering if she can somehow take him out of that.
Completely. That's really key as well. That even as far as Deathwing went, she was one of the only ones, if not the only one, who thought that Neltharion was still there deep down and that there was some kind of way to salvage him. Unfortunately, I guess she knew that it was impractical impractical to try further, and that they had to do what they had to do. But she's the kind of person that I think she sees everybody as redeemable. No matter what darkness, she thinks there's a way to pull them out of that.
I think it just comes down to her being like a general sort of like overarching motherly type. Because like you often will see like mums who have like the drop kick like kids and stuff like that. They never give up on them. They always have hope that they'll always be there, like that they'll come good and all that sort of stuff. So I think that Alex Strasser is like the sort of like mom of like everyone when it comes to like the dragons and possibly like even like the lesser races as well. Like she mothers them a bit.
I just pulled out my chronicle with the elemental duality because I wanted to see like if fire could have been maybe a trait about compassion or something, because that's really what Alex Strasser's always been about, is compassion. And it's not. Fire is actually passion. Well, I guess that's kind of similar in a way, but it's also fury. I find that really interesting because Alex Strasza is the complete opposite. She can always control herself. She's never snappy and angry, and fury is definitely never how I would describe her, which most characters in the Warcraft universe, when they are related to fire, it is all about their anger and their hot temper and their fury. So it's really interesting how she completely has that in check. I'd hate to see like if the Lich King raises Alex Strasza or whatever people are speculating with him going after the Red Dragonflight as a whole. If we ever see an Alex Strasza that's against us, I'd hate to see that if she's like some super angry, fiery kind of person, because it's so opposite from what she is.
That'd be a sad day when that comes.
Another thing I wanted to quickly mention about her before we move on is her role in war crimes, because as we know, she has been through a lot with what the orcs put her through, what Deathwing put her through, forcing her to basically create the Twilight Dragons, basically for her to lay all these eggs for them to be corrupted and tortured. And it didn't break her at all. Like, you see multiple times in WoW, there's a character who goes through some kind of great tragedy, and you see the effect on their character, and you see how dark they go. Verisa, Sylvanas, Jaina, but that never happened to Alex Strasza. She did go through all of that pain, but it never changed her perspective on her love, and she never turned to hatred, even against Garrosh. In War Crimes, she doesn't even hate Garrosh. She doesn't even think death is Garrosh is worthy of death. She thinks that everybody can be redeemed, and that's something you really don't see in WoW. Like, to have a character that's that forgiving, I guess, is one way to put it. Some people would say ignorant, but you don't see many people like that.
What's funny is that since she is blessed by ANR, is that you can kind of see ANR's personality through that, because she still had hope for Sargeras to the bitter end too, if you really see it with the Pantheon and whatnot. So you're seeing those similarities.
For sure. Ysera, I feel like, has a complete different perspective, which we'll talk about too, even though, she's imbued by ANR as well. But kind of, I guess, I don't know if you guys had anything else to say about Alex Strasza, but I also wanted to point out, in her proto-drake form, she's described as being an orange proto-drake with very smooth, glistening, glass-like scales. Like, she's very slim and small, and I guess pretty for a proto-drake. And she looks, I guess, the most civilized. Like, she doesn't look bloodthirsty and ragged. Even as a proto-drake, she takes remorse in hunting and in killing, even just to eat. And she's kind of just always been the type of Alex Strasza that we know, which is rare. the other protodrakes were not like her. As we'll explain, you know, each of the dragons, even before they were imbued by the Titans, they were all very different from the rest of their species. They were much more intelligent. They were much closer to the dragons we have today in how they acted, interacted, spoke. A lot of the protodrakes didn't even speak. Like they weren't even smart enough for language at that point. So these guys are they were really different from their kind.
Yeah, like of all the other proto drakes too, they were the only ones that were like, I don't like this what Galacheron is doing. Like they still had a personality. They were different before they were given the blessing, but like they were the only ones that like really stood up to him and got like other proto drakes to kind of join in, and that, like, which is a lot to say, is that at least there was a little form of sentience within that.
And that is the big word, because it almost seems like prior to this, the protodrakes weren't even all that sentient. Like, I mean, they were like animals basically. They didn't really talk. They were more about instincts. They definitely wouldn't band together, create an organization, and plot. It wasn't like that. But did you guys have anything else to add about Alexstrasza, or did you want to move to our next dragonflight?
I think moving's pretty good.
Definitely.
Okay, so next let's talk about Ysera, the green dragonflight, since we already kind of touched on her a bit. She's a sister of Alexstrasza. We mentioned how Alexstrasza had the orange scales, the glass-like orange scales. Surprisingly, Ysera didn't have the same color scales. She wasn't orange, she was actually kind of a pale yellow. And where we learn this in the book, The Dawn of the Aspects, when Caligos is given visions of Malygos's life, so he's seeing this through Malygos's eyes, and he actually is privy to what Malygos was thinking at the time. And Malygos considers Ysera to be sickly, kind of almost like an albino dragon, like she's frail, she's small, like she's the runt of the litter. Um, he actually says he's surprised that her parents didn't kill her at birth because she's so pathetic. And she's a coward. In her protodrake state, like I mentioned, she's completely useless. She's really a mess, which is so interesting. Because once she's empowered by Aenar, it's like that was everything she needed to really shine.
Like she needed that push. They even said like she was kind of like technically anxiety ridden and like neurotic, like just not just frail, but like questioned everything kind of deal, like was unsure of like where to go or what their next move was. They needed
Absolutely.
Alexstrasza for like everything to take them. It was literally like Alexstrasza like taking her proto wing and legs, like holding her hand through life.
And I think that the green dragons as a whole have embodied that trait as well. If you think of Iranicus as a main example, obviously Crassus, Alexstrasza's consort, embodies everything that the red dragonflight is about. He's a leader, he's questioning, he's preserving life, he's like exactly what you'd think a red dragon. And then Iranicus, Ysera's consort, he's so anxiety ridden, like he's really an emotional mess. And then as the nightmare plagues him, it's almost like he's in this depression and he's constantly, I mean, maybe that's really why the Greens are portrayed in that way, because of their idealists. And then all of a sudden the nightmare comes and everything that they thought is taken away, and how that would affect them, and the instability of their emotions and the second guessing everything.
Yeah, it's quite insane and like quite sad really too, because there's points where Freya even like reverts back to that kind of personality where she questions herself, and Alexstrasza has to pull her back out again.
You mean Ysera?
Yeah, sorry. Well, I'm saying Alexstrasza pulling her back out of like her stupor.
Yeah. I mean, again, in Dawn of the Aspects, it's Ysera who actually first suggests disbanding the Wormrest Accord. Deathwing is, running rampant. The dragons are desperately needed to team up again and stop him, just like they did with Galakrond. And Ysera's like, we've lost our power, we're nothing without it, like, we put our power in the dragon soul and now there's not even a point in fighting, like, it's hopeless, why did we even gather here to discuss our next moves, we should just disband the Accord. Like, that's Ysera's personality. Like, it completely defeated. However, of course, when she's in her element, protecting the dream, doing her duty to Aenar and to Elune, it's like you see a different side of her almost when you're, in books like Storm Rage, with Malfurion and Tyrande's defense of the dream back in Vanilla, for example. Ysera really is a hero, and she really does know everything about the dream, and she's very confident in that.
She really is. And I mean, the thing is, and you can see that she is completely dedicated, and unfortunately in Legion, rest in peace, Ysera, that her remnant of her is still in the dream, and she's looking over that dark lotus flower from the void. So it's just like, it's incredible even in death. And she's not truly like dead if you really think about it, because her soul and whatnot is within the dream, and that's her realm. That she's still doing her duty.
Just a small idea. When, like, we talk about Alexstrasza and Ysera, like, they're total polar opposites to each other, like a balance. And then they're both imbued by Aenar, who gave her powers to Freya, and this whole line is all about balance, having this connection of balancing these bad and good traits, which is what you see in Alexstrasza and Ysera, and they bounce off each other and create the perfect balance. So then when you take them as a group, you're taking, like, this really good force is giving power into making the bad force, but also it could bring down Alexstrasza a bit because she has to leave back her own powers to go over to Ysera. But then when you think of it further, when Ysera dies, there's still that balance because she's still going to be in the dream, and Alexstrasza is the lifebinder. She's always going to have this wielding power over life. So there's always that balance in their relationship, and it is probably a tie to why Aenar chose them.
Yeah, I mean, in Dawn of the Aspects, Ysera was the one who was like trying to get the other dragons to like sort of broker a peace with Galakrond and the Unliving. She was also the one who like kept trying to sort of like push that like peace could be like achieved, etc., etc. I remember a part of the book where Ysera manages to, or what Ysera believes she's managed to broker like an agreement where the Unliving go into a canyon and they're going to live in that canyon, and they're like going to be that's fine, and all the other proto-drags are going to like live like elsewhere. But then Talanixia, which is another proto-drake who led an army against Galakrond, like collapses the canyon on top of the Unliving, and Ysera's like greatly affected by that. It was also Ysera that noticed that Malagos had been bitten by an Unliving drake, and she didn't mention it because everyone was killing those who were being bitten, because being bitten meant that you would eventually succumb to like the crazy Unliving stuff. So I think Ysera was fairly close to what Alexstrasza is like now. When she was a proto-drake, she was just like that weird one that sort of sat over in the background, and yeah.
Yeah, it's true how you say that weird one, because that is kind of how everybody looked at her until she became, the dreamer, and until she became the leader of the Green Dragon flight. She wasn't regarded as very well in the eyes of the other proto-drakes. I mean, even Malygos especially kind of looks down on her at first, um, whereas Alexstrasza is constantly impressive. And I think what Rin says is totally true, like that Alexstrasza and Ysera are bound to work together, and that's when they ground each other and they can accomplish great things. But the Green Dragons as a whole have had tremendous hurdles with the Emerald Nightmare that, for example, the Blue Dragonflight hasn't really had to deal with. Sure, Malygos went crazy. We had some issues with Malygos. They have a really big burden on their shoulders being blues, that they have to protect the arcane, and there's all this power that they need to protect. But um, the average blue dragonflight, you're pretty powerful and you're pretty safe, and you don't have all that much to worry about. Whereas the greens, it's like a constant struggle. They have to constantly ground themselves in their mind and be in control of their own mind, and when they're going back to and from the dream, they have to constantly keep watch and make sure that there's no nightmare presence, because it's so insidious. It's always hidden and where you'd least expect it, and it's always in the back of their mind, especially those who have been tainted before, because as we see how much it affects Aranicus, once you've been tainted by the nightmare once, you can never truly be free of it. Your sanity is never safe from that point on.
Yeah, there's a quest line through Feralis that you help Ysondra try and like reclaim back the like her sanity, and help like I think it's like Terra or something. Like the other the other three green dragon lieutenants anyway, go and you go and try and like uncorrupt them and whatnot. But she mentions that while she might be free of the nightmares like insidious influence now, she can't always be sure that she will be. So she can't like live with the night elves, and she can't live with the dragons. Like she needs to like go and like just live by herself. And I always got really sad with that quest.
Well, the way you talk about it, it makes me wonder if that anxiety and that questioning themselves actually works in their favor in what the duty that was brought on to them, because they can't trust their own mind. The way that the nightmare works, they can't really tell what's real and what's unreal, right? And they have to be able to question even what they themselves are thinking in order to stay safe from that. So I guess in that way, Ysera was the perfect person for that job.
Forgive me, it felt so real. I'm sorry, Ysera.
Rest in peace, Ysera. You'll be back though. It's MBD. You're in the cosmos. You'll be back.
Well, just as Gizmo said, she's bound to the dream, so it seems as though she can't truly be killed unless it's done in the dream. That's something that players have often thought, at least for the greens as a whole and the wild gods and things, but Ysera is also special. She has her own little Eye of Ysera realm, and I wouldn't be surprised if she may even need to be killed within that. Because why didn't you'd think Xavius would have just killed her in the dream if that's what it took. But I feel like it might take a little bit more than that in her case. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. Maybe they had to destroy her physical body in the real world so she couldn't escape the Emerald Dream. Now she's trapped in the Emerald Dream. Like they can either influence her that way, or they'll have to kill her in there. But while she doesn't have a physical body, she can't escape.
Yeah, I think it's the same situation as Cenarius in that her spirit lives on, so she's going to take some time to regenerate a new physical body or something potentially. But we'll have to see. I mean, I've kind of always assumed that the way the dragon aspects worked is that they're kind of a happy medium between the keepers, the Titan keepers, and the wild gods. To me, they've always seemed like they're right in the middle. They were animals that were imbued. They do have a connection to Azeroth and a charge to defend Azeroth. They work with the mortals and protect the mortals, just like the wild gods. But and the night elves specifically, but they have those parts of Titans in them, and they understand a lot of the workings. Not everything that the keepers would understand in terms of machinery and stuff, but they understand a lot about the way the different forces of the world interact. So it'll be interesting to see if Ysera kind of takes the wild god route and that she just kind of regenerates, or what happens.
She is now a Loa, and she's going to become the Loa of Kings.
I don't know if Loa of Kings. Can she be the Loa of Queens? Can we have troll monarchy? Or that's not the right word.
Show us the way, my queen.
Oh
No.
no.
I did it.
Like the honey to the bees.
Oh,
my
my
God.
god, no!
Okay, so moving away from that, let's go to the Black Dragonflight, huh?
Woo! Angry spiky boy, Mr.
Time to go down
Neltharion.
Oh.
So what's important to note about Neltharion's proto-drake form is that he's a gray proto-drake. So was Galakrond. They, so far most proto-drakes are just earthy colors. Like there's no dragon flights at this point. They don't necessarily have the exact same skin color as their siblings, but they're close. It's weird that Ysera is yellow and Alexstrasza is orange despite them being siblings. It's more common that they would be of a similar tone. And Neltharion is gray, same as Galakrond, and specifically his scales are very rigid and rocky. He's a little bit bigger than the average proto-drake, nowhere near as big as Deathwing is in Kata, but slightly bigger than the others. And it's interesting to me that at this point it seems like he's already exhibiting a lot of his earth border characteristics of the way that he, his coloring and how he's rocky. He'd be able to simply blend in the mountains and be in, it seems like that kind of dragon's culture would be to camouflage within, the rocks, the crevices and caves and things like that. But
Yeah.
Neltharion's kind of always described as arrogant, even from the start. He's nowhere near as arrogant as he turns out to be later, but he kind of wants to be the hero. He kind of thinks he's better than everyone else, and he has this rivalry with Malygos.
Yeah, which I found interesting for an Earthwarder to be, fighting with a Spellweaver. Like, what?
He was also described as physically stronger than some of the other proto-drakes, which could just lead to an ego, obviously. It happens to all the best people.
That's right, and that's where his complex of being the hero kind of stems, because he knows that when the other ones are helpless, he's able to come in and defend them. Because he's just stronger. But, actually all the dragons at this point do have fire breath, except for Malygos. But that's Deathwing included, so, he's not really exhibiting the whole molten volcano kind of Deathwing that we see later on, but at this point he's already very charismatic. he's kind of a bit full of himself and wants to be the center of attention, which probably is a trait that goes on later to help him in regards to integrating with the nobles and the into politics wherever he supplants himself as Prestor.
He was in Lordaeron.
Right, but among other places like Netherguard Keep and Alterac.
Yeah. Which is also a thing, just like in the Black Dragonflight in general. They all have a good disguise. They know how to really blend in with people, no matter who they are, where they are. They're just really good at disguising themselves and being this thing that they're actually not. And it could come from that stemming of the whole camouflage ideal. Maybe that's just the thing. Like, just that was his natural instinct, and then therefore ran through the rest of the bloodline.
I completely agree. The way that his scales were, the way that if he was still in a cave or on a mountain, he would blend in with the mountain, where Alexstrasza and Ysera and Malygos would never be able to do that because they were a bit more colored, right? So that probably did contribute to the way the Black Dragonflight is in terms of integrating and camouflaging themselves into other societies.
Messing with people's minds.
How dare they?
Well, I don't know. When you read about his proto-Drake form, did you guys think he kind of exhibited any red flags or worrisome traits at that point? Because I didn't really get other than his rivalry with Malygos. I guess it's the ego, which is the red flag.
If you think about, like, now I'm talking about like an evolutionary thing in like real life. I mean, it kind of makes sense that he's having a fight with another male dragon. Granted, though, they're different dragon flights. Maybe they didn't mate with each other, but maybe it's like a peacock spider where it's like, who's the better fucking male? I'm prettier. Like, notice me, senpai. Like, I don't know.
That's actually a very good point. When I read about it, I didn't think of that. But there is something weird going on with Deathwing and Alexstrasza and how he like wants to possess her. And I wouldn't be surprised if even back when they were proto-drakes, if he was trying to like impress her or something.
In Dawn of the Aspects, I'm not quite sure how far you guys are through it or not. But all the dragons that Alexstrasza like belongs to Alexstrasza's flight, or there were other drakes out there that had her coloring and whatnot. Malygos, when he goes and does his sort of like detective work, he comes across a couple of drakes that are actually eating the corpse of a dragon that would have been a red dragon. And he himself feels like a pull towards eating the corpse of this red dragon, or would have been red dragon. And he says like it's an overwhelming like urge to eat this corpse. So it could just be like the overwhelming sort of like nature of the red dragons being all about life. Like that's why he wants to possess her, because she would have this like emanating power coming out of her. So that could be that. With the rivalry between Malygos and Neltharion, I kind of just put it down to the stereotypical jock trying to like beat up the stereotypical nerd.
I completely got that too.
Yeah. Also, Malygos is older. He was the oldest one, and he also was probably. I think they said that Malygos was really the only one that was sort of like borderline, like being able to talk, and so like he had like this superior intellect, and that would have gotten under Neltharion's skin a bit, because he's just like, well, I'm the best, and then Malygos is like, yeah, well, can you talk? And she's like, I don't have to talk. I beat you, I bench press you, kind of thing. So that's my sort of take on that.
Me Neltharion, me strong, me
Me
break
best. Me look like lead singer of Rammstein.
Did you just call him to Linman again?
Maybe. He reminds me of that.
you. Me listen to rock music.
Me heavy metal.
Very edgy.
Edgelord. He's
wasn't
an
edgy
edgelord.
He wasn't edgy until he turned into Deathwing. Then he went into his like emo teenage phase.
Oh, wow. Nice way to put it.
Went from Rammstein to My Chemical Romance.
Hey, you know what? At least he wasn't basic.
None of them isn't. I was gonna say none of them are basic, but then I'm like, isn't his Dormu basic? Oh no.
No, he's a fancy boy, and let me smash. That's all I gotta say about Nazudumo. If we're gonna talk about anybody, the newest one, which we'll get to with Kalagos, that guy is basic. You can have him, Jaina.
Poor Calic.
He doesn't know what he's doing with his hair. That's the problem.
Yeah,
Oh,
boy needs
God.
some pomade.
Okay, rip conversation. Where were we?
God, real mean.
Neltharion.
Yeah, Neltharion.
Okay. He's probably I'd say him and Malagos are the two most important ones early on. Of course, because they end up influenced by the old gods. But coming into BFA, Alex, Straz, and Ysera, and Nizdormu, even, those three will probably get more of the spotlight. So I feel like a lot of what we've already been told about Neltharion and the Blacks is kind of set in stone. Like, we already... Set in stone. We already know a lot about them. We're not gonna learn a lot. She's so disappointed in me. But I feel like we already know a lot that we're gonna get about Neltharion. And something to really keep in mind is that it was really ultimately his ego that led him to go against the others. N'Zoth held on to the aspect of, oh, you are so much stronger than the others. You're so much more capable than the others. You have control and you can integrate yourself and manipulate, and you can, if you do this, like, you can be their leader. You can, you know what's best for the world, and they should be following you, is kind of the seed that they planted to Neltharion's head. And I think it's through that same vein, that's why he goes and he tries to control even the different kingdoms. You know, he kind of controls the the Horde in a way, the Orcish Horde. He controls the humans in a way during the war. Well, in a way, in a big way. But I think that's when those seeds for that was already planted, when he gets this idea that he should be in command of the other dragons. I'm not sure if that's... I mean, I feel like maybe you might be oversimplifying a bit intentionally, Gizmo. But, like, yeah, that was a big part of it. But I'm not sure if that's solely responsible for Malagos going nuts, because we kind of see through Calic's eyes, Calic almost goes nuts. And that's not because of the Dragon Soul. That's because the old gods are whispering to him through this artifact, in a way.
One thing I did want to mention is that when like I'm sure this will come up with Malagos as well, but Neltharion actually like calls Malagos like his blood brother after they like get into a giant fight with a bunch of unliving. So while they might have started out with a rivalry, it seemed like at least at one point Neltharion did like actually like respect Malagos.
Now, a big thing about the Black Dragon flight that we kind of haven't touched on is, of course, the fact that they're experimenting on things. Deathwing, or Neltharion, is imbued by Khazgaroth, who was kind of the forger, and it was because of him that we have a lot of the machinery that we do with creating the Titan Keeper, the Titan Forged and things. And I think that it has a lot to go into why Deathwing has created this other dragonflight, the Twilights, and the same way Nefarian was trying to create a chromatic flight, and the same way that I mean, Onyxia it tries to get her own army together of all these different forces, but specifically, the chromatic dragonflight works a lot like the dragon soul in a way. I wouldn't be surprised if they're being whispered to by both by N'Zoth in that sense, because I mean, we kind of know that they were, but specifically that there's some merit in creating this ultimate amalgamation of all the dragon powers, because both Neltharion and Nefarian do this.
Which is really like messed up with messing with the different dragonflights and how they breed together. It's like what makes you think about like going that route and intermingling things and messing with in a form like genetics.
Specifically blood. It's like blood magic or something that Nefarian is using in Blackwing Lair. If my cat weren't in the way of my monitor, I would look at who's next. Okay, blue dragonflight. Okay, so that's kind of a big one, because we've got, of course, Malygos, but then we also have Calicos, who's the new blue aspect.
So let's start with Malagos.
So he was a blue-green proto-drake. He was completely different from the others because he had frost breath instead of fire breath. And he was smarter than all the others, and he took a lot of pride in being smarter. He was also had an ego about his intelligence, and he kind of tried to he wanted to be smarter in the others' eyes. It was always important to him to keep up the appearance of having superior intellect.
There was also hints throughout the book that it was Malagos that was able to pick up that Tyr was around. In the part where I was mentioning that Neltharion and Malagos were like fighting the unliving, Malagos looks up, sees like a humanoid on like the mountain ridge or something like that. And he goes to Neltharion and he's like, oh, do you see that like humanoid figure or something like that? And Malagos is like, well, what human? You're crazy, and flies off. And then all the way through the book, you sort of like pick up that Malagos has like just sort of like this innate ability to perceive or feel like magic.
The same way that Calic does, although Calic's at this point, he's seeing through Malygos' eyes, and he's even picking up on things that Malygos didn't, because he's still got the superior magical abilities. I mean, at that point, Calic is seeing this through the eyes of somebody who is probably like one of the smartest mages and people, arcane, students on Azeroth, probably. And for him to be able to see and study like the old Malygos and Galakrond and all of that, he's picking up on a lot of things that none of the dragons saw, and there's certain points where he wants to warn Malygos, but he can't because he has no impact over the situation. He's just an observer.
It's pretty crazy, and I always found it interesting that he's capable of broken speech. Have you guys ever found that interesting?
Sorry, can you repeat that about the broken speech?
That he was capable of speaking it.
Yeah.
I don't think the other dragonflights are able to do that.
Most of the dragons in the book can't. The ones that we know who become aspects, it's like as the book goes on, they get smarter and smarter, but they are like really broken English. Like they say like one or two words. He can actually make sentences. They're not amazing sentences, but like I think it's described in the book that Malygos gets frustrated with his own inability to formulate his ideas and to get them out and communicate to the others, because his brain is like way ahead of his ability to talk. Like, or maybe the fact that it doesn't make much sense, because like, do they have a language? Like, how is this working? How are they communicating? But
Right.
There's a lot of points where Malygos has this intricate plan and he can't tell the others what it is, and he's trying to get it out into his broken English, and he's like frustrated about the whole ordeal. And the other ones just, they respond with like a word,
Right. That would be so frustrating to have your mind going a million miles a minute and not being able to get the words spit out and your ideas out. I can see why he would be so infuriated with that.
I guess it's like when you first move to a foreign country and you're trying to say what you want to say, but then you totally blank. Like, it's definitely that feeling.
Yeah, like it's a barrier.
I definitely agree that Malygos was more powerful than Calicos when he was an aspect. Malygos is
Right.
the more powerful aspect. But, when Calic goes back and he sees Proto-Drake Malygos, there's no question. Like, Calic is light years ahead of him at that point.
Definitely.
But it's really interesting the way that the old gods manipulate the blues specifically. With with the black dragons, it's like they're just constantly have this link. Just because of their link with the earth, they're constantly able to just whisper to them at any time. They can just communicate with Deathwing. They can just shout out when Deathwing's present. But I don't think they can do that with the others. I don't think they can just call up Alexstrasza and, dial into her brain and talk to her. It's specifically they
Yeah,
can do
ring
that
ring.
with Neltharion and Malygos. I think his affiliation with magic and his attraction to magic is the crux. Like, the same way the old gods manipulate Caligos with arcane artifacts, it's like they can lure them into a dangerous tool and have it take control over them.
Also, like I was saying before, like Malagos was also bitten by one of the unliving. That and when he was bitten, he said that he had like a bloodlust take over his mind. Like he had to very much sort of like be in control of his thoughts because at certain points, like the disease, I guess, like from the bite, would send him a bit crazy. And I remember reading that part and thinking, well, maybe Tyr didn't actually like cleanse him properly, like didn't heal him properly, and there was like still that like slight lingering sense of like craziness in the back of his mind, and all it sort of needed to come to the forefront again was like Neltharion, or Deathwing at that point, like slaughtering the majority of the Blue Flight at the during the War of the Ancients over the Well of Eternity.
So you would attribute that to be like one of the probably the main reasons why he went kind of crazy, because it inflicts that.
Yeah, like I was just thinking that maybe that's what the old gods were sort of like using to sort of weaken him, or that the old gods somehow knew about that, and if the old gods had a hand in how Galakron sort of went, um, how he did, which was the whole "I'm going to eat everything."
Yeah, that one's an interesting subject to go on about the dragon aspects, because could you attribute it to the same thing of like, did he go into the same effect as Galakron did with the necrotic and whatnot? Because Galakron, he kind of went nutty and just started like eating.
Well, Tyr manages to cure what we think is all of it, but it would be interesting if a bit of this hunger for power, or hunger for the energy, for the mana, for his desire to take these ley lines and all for himself, with those surge needles, like if that could be a lingering effect of Galakron's blight that somehow later was tapped into. I could see that.
Yeah, because as you sort of like progress through Malagos' story and stuff like that, like some of his I think it's like his lucid state is somehow restored via siphoning some of the energies out of the nether drakes. That because he viewed the nether drakes from Outland as like abominations that shouldn't be. So he like siphons the magic off them, and he's like insanity is somewhat restored a little bit. So it kind of made me think that maybe like that hunger when he was bitten back as a protodrake never was truly fixed properly.
Yeah, and the whole idea of siphoning off of something else is very cannibalistic in the same way that Galakron worked as well. For him to want to take the like mana away from everybody else and only the blues can use arcane magic was kind of his goal in the end, so that mortals wouldn't have access to that. Yeah, it is quite similar to what happened to Malagos and by extension Deathwing, with their egos and their desire, they're putting themselves above everyone else and etc.
Right. Now, here's a really cool thing. Like, for instance, like Lhok, you taught me this. I had no idea about this for all the things that I've read up on dragon aspects. But the elves going into the Nexus and stealing things and artifacts, and that caused the Crystal Song Forest to form in Northrend. Like, what? That's incredible.
Yeah. So when the Sundering happened, the elves that were up in the Crystal Song Forest, that we now know, the Crystal Song Forest, they were cut off from their magical supply. So there was like turning into the withered, basically, or what we know as the withered today. And they saw the blues like siphoning energies out of things, and they knew the Nexus was nearby, and so they go into the Nexus and they steal the magical atoms in order to try and like bolster their magic. To keep themselves alive, and the blues don't like this. If you've ever done the Disc Priest weapon chain from Legion, you go into the Nexus to steal Light's wrath from the Nexus, and the dragons all are very angry about stealing it. And you go in with Azuragos to get it out. But yeah, so like it's sort of the same sort of story. Like you go into the Nexus, you steal these items, dragons try and stop you, you get beaten up. But what happened with the elves is that the dragons follow them back to Crystal Song Forest, and I can't remember it correctly. It's either the elves unleash all the magic within the items, and that is what causes the crystallization of the forest, or the dragons cause the crystallization of the forest by attacking the elves. I don't remember it. I don't fully remember it.
That's really interesting. I never knew about that until you've mentioned that. I think that's really cool.
I think it was called something like, I want to say like Moon Song Forest or something before.
Yeah, I don't remember the actual like forest's name. I should, but yeah, I don't.
And it was all wintry, just like the rest of Northrend, but when this crystallization happens, it, I guess all of the trees, instead of being like just generic wintry trees, they turn into these like crystal trees as we see in game. Well, I think did we kind of touch on everything with the blues? I guess we didn't talk much about Caligos. So basically what happens is after we take out Malagos, we don't agree with his decision to take all the magic away from the mortals and keep it under the blue dragons alone. So we go and put an end to that with Alexstras's help. We deem that he's insane. And later on, Caligos is chosen to be the next aspect, and he's imbued with power to follow in Malagos's footsteps. There is an embrace with the moons, which is quite fascinating because it makes me wonder if those original dragons, who before the Titans imbued them, the reason why they were so different from the others, I wonder if Elune had anything to do with them in the first place. If they, kind of like the whole night elves being born with golden eyes, I wonder if those dragons and what set them apart from the others, if that even had anything to do with Elune, but we don't fully know. And this embrace happens, and magic shoots down at the Nexus, and Kalik becomes the next aspect, and he's basically always unsure of himself. He's kind of like the rookie. He's although he's super old, he's young compared to the rest of them, and he acts how you would expect someone who's kind of an amateur to act. He's a bit rash. He's a bit he second guesses himself. He doesn't always speak his mind to the others out of respect because he doesn't want to blurt out something foolish. And I'm not sure if he's really overcome that yet. I mean, he kind of comes into his own, but I think he knows full well after seeing what the others went through with Galakron. He knows he's kind of the odd one out, and he doesn't have that experience backing him. Like, he was never a proto-Drake. So it's like the others have this wisdom of years over him. And we know he's involved with Anvina, and then now involved with Jaina. And that's interesting. We learn in that book that, in Dawn of the Aspects, Jaina and Kaligos communicate kind of telepathically. Like, both of their arcane minds are just so strong that they can just, like, call each other and just, almost, telepathically speak to one another. So, I found that fascinating. But I wonder if by that extension the blues can communicate with each other over large distances, because we know, for example, when they're transporting the focusing iris in Tides of War, certain older dragons who are more in tune and more powerful magically, they're able to sense the focusing iris as it's moving and kind of track it, right? And it's Jaina in the end who helps Kalik to eventually find the focusing iris once it's gone missing, because her arcane powers are so strong. She's like almost dragon, she's blue dragon level strong. I wouldn't say aspect level, but she's stronger than even the young blue dragons.
That one I actually don't know about.
But yeah, did you guys, was there anything else to add about the blues, or do you want to finish off with the bronze?
Let's go ahead and finish off with the bronze. The only thing I have to say about Kaligos is, like, you can stick with Jaina. Because obviously he's attracted to chicks with magical energies. That's all he cares about.
And as weird as this sounds, I mean, people have mentioned multiple times how young she is, how young Anvina was compared to him. But, like, let's be real, he's kind of said multiple times, he's, like, attracted to their innocence. And it's like, that's kind of creepy, Kaligos. Like, keep that to yourself.
Right? It is creepy.
Okay, Bronze Dragonflight. Nozdormu, Chromie, Soridormi. There's so many bronze dragons that have been really integral to the story, but main thing we gotta worry about is, of course, Nozdormu turning into Murazond, who is his alter ego infinite dragonflight self, who's supposed to bring the Hour of Twilight in the end. And what I always found interesting was, if Deathwing's trying to bring the Hour of Twilight, and the aspects stop him, shouldn't Nozdormu of all people know somehow that Deathwing isn't going to succeed? Because Nozdormu knows, he's been shown, that the one to bring the Hour of the Twilight is himself, is Murazond. I was always a bit confused about that. Does he not trust his visions in the Time Way 100%? Like, did he legit think there was a chance that Deathwing would do it and that Murazond doing it isn't a thing? What did you guys think of that?
You cut out for a second, my dear.
Oh. So I was just saying, Nozdormu has seen the vision of Murazon bringing the Hour of Twilight. He knows that he's going to be the one to bring the Hour of Twilight in the end, because Ementhul showed him. And he strongly believes that this is true. He's never shown any doubt in this. He feels like that is the case. So I've just always been a bit confused over why Deathwing was even a big threat if Deathwing was trying to bring on the Hour of Twilight, the aspects, the Wyrmrest Accord as a whole is trying to stop him. Shouldn't Nozdormu kind of have known that Deathwing wasn't going to be the one to bring Hour of Twilight, and in Kata we stop him, and etc.? Like, isn't it clear that Murazon is the real threat? I'm just a little confused about that.
I think he definitely has like seen it. He knows how he's supposed to go. Amethyst gave him that vision when he was chosen as the aspect of time. What I think is like interesting is that they say that the old gods managed to sort of like trick him into becoming Morozond. I don't know how they managed that. I don't know how they managed to get him to shatter the time ways, and that's what we see at the end time. So my sort of thoughts are like I'm more curious as to like how that's going to go down. Like I'd be wanting to see how the old gods influence that part. I'm not sure if that made much sense.
Well, what did you think about how in Dawn of the Aspects it makes it pretty clear? I don't think we get this perspective in game when we do the Dragon Soul raid, but basically what's happened is Nozdormu is taking us back in time to retrieve the Dragon Soul and to bring the Dragon Soul into current time to defeat Deathwing. So I think how it works is in that Dragon Soul raid, when you go to the Maelstrom at the end, that's not back in time anymore. Like, you're being sent back into current time to the Maelstrom to take out Deathwing for real, but everything that happened before that in Wyrmrest and everything with all those maws all over the place in Northrend, that's like back in time, I think. And so Nozdormu is really conflicted about going back and getting the Dragon Soul, and he doesn't want to do it because using his powers to try and change the course of the future, even if it's in defense of Azeroth, is against his mandate. He's been charged by Aman'Thul not to use his powers to go back in time and to change anything. And he's completely against this plan that Alexstrasza has formulated, and it's only when Ysera says to him, why would the Titans have given you this power only for you not to be allowed to use it for good? Ysera convinces him, and she says, this is what you were made to do. You're the only one who can stop Deathwing. You need to go back in time and do this. And he's really against it, because according to him, it's against his charge. But do you think that's the kind of thing that is going to doom him? Do you think it's dangerous for him to be going against his charge for the sake of the world? I think that might be where the old gods can trick him.
Well, I know they trap him in between time waves, and that's what takes him so long to actually get out. And Sorodomi, during like the original War of the Ancients, she has to sort of like take up and like sort of be there where Nor's Dormu would have been. So like in his place, she's there, and I think that that's kind of why he didn't want to go back. I'm not very good with the whole timey-wimey stuff because it really wrecks my brain.
But that's what the Bronze Dragon fight is about.
I'm
I
aware
thought you
of
said
this.
he was Bay.
He is, but his abilities break my brain.
Yeah, his abilities are a little like god tier. Like what?
Yeah, even in his Proto-Drake form, he's using sand attacks. I always found that really weird. he shows up late to the party, so I did wonder if he came from somewhere else and that maybe he wasn't used to hanging around in Northrend. I'm not sure, but it always struck me as really odd that he's attacking the unliving with sand, and he's like a dragon from Northrend, a proto drake. Like, there's something weird about that. It doesn't seem I don't know. Did you guys find that weird?
I do, but I also don't take it seriously too, because then it just reminds me of a dog kicking sand or dirt up.
Yeah, I kind of thought
It's
like
like,
he
really?
came from the south. So, like where the deserts and stuff came from, that's where I thought
So,
he
like,
came from.
Well, the bronze dragons have an extra layer down in the south where the caverns of time are, which the other dragons don't really have. So, and the fact that he shows up late to the party, we don't get to know exactly why, but when Malygos, Neltharion, Ysera, and Alexstrasza meet, Nozdormu isn't part of the picture for like quite a while. He's not even there. And when he finally shows up, he's kind of a bit mysterious. It's peculiar that he's using sand, but yeah, I wonder if he literally came from the south, and that's why he uses sand attacks instead of, like, blending in with their natural environment.
Do we have like bones that might be similar to his that are in like Uldir and whatnot? I mean, the Caverns of Time is there down in the south and Tanaris, but would his
There's dragon
homeland be
bones.
there? Yeah,
Sorry.
there is. I'm just curious if it's more proto Drake type or like evolved aspects.
I wouldn't be able to tell, but there are like what looks like really, really old dragon bones in Oldham.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of big rib cages and stuff in Tanaris and in Silithus. I mean, there's Garacheron's bones in Silithus, but maybe there was a secondary dragon burial ground, dragon graveyard, down in the south that had a completely different tribe. I mean, tribe isn't the right word, but race of proto-drakes from the south.
Species.
Yeah. But I don't know. I think that the bronze dragons are the next ones to go mad. We've had the black dragons, we've had the blue dragons, we've already had the seeds sown for the bronze to come, and it seems like the green has already kind of been taken out. Like, I think that's what we were supposed to grasp with the Emerald Nightmare raid, was that Ysera's kind of out of the picture, so the only ones left for the old gods to mess with now are Nozdormu and Alex, and I think Nozdormu is going to come first, and then we'll be left with Alexstrasza. What do you guys think?
I think so too, which I find that really sad because I want Sandy Boy to win. I want Sandy Boy to be the last one to go, but hey, that's me.
Well,
I mean, technically, we have already killed Morazon.
I don't think that really meant anything, though.
Yeah.
It's confusing to think about, but if there's many time ways, there can be many Murazons as far as we know. Technically, we killed Murazond, I believe, in a time way that had been messed with, right? Not the true time way.
Yes, I believe so, because Deathwing impaled himself upon Wormrest in that timeline.
Yeah, I think Nozdormu is against the idea of going into the future and stopping Murazond from happening the same way Chromie does to stop her deaths. I think if that was what Nozdormu wanted to do, he would have done it. So who knows, maybe that'll change, but at this point, I feel like he is accepting the fact that that's going to happen to him. And he's just hoping that we'll be able to take on that challenge and defeat him, I guess. But I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if we lose Nozdormu and we don't defeat him right away. Like, he goes off into infinite Dragonflight land and we don't hear from him for a while.
That wouldn't surprise me at all. Where he kind of just poof. Bye, bitches. I am. I am transformed.
But, yeah, to kind of tie everything together, what did you guys think about the dragon aspects and the dragon soul in relation to the old god's prisons? We've heard that 5 keys, 5 torches. People thrown in, the world trees. Do you guys think that when the keepers imbued the dragons and gave them the charge of protecting the world, do you think that in some way the old gods are specifically targeting the aspects, or that they're trying to free themselves through through these machinations involving the aspects, or how do you think that all fits in?
I definitely think that the old gods are tampering with dragons. I think just the old gods tamper with any titanic creation, whether or not they're the 5 keys or the 5 torches, and they must be like gotten rid of before the old gods can reawaken. I am on the fence about it.
I'm honestly wondering if, with what happened with Sargeras being ushered in, I wonder if that's actually as close as we've come to the old gods being freed. Like, I wonder if that's what that whole ritual was actually about, and they didn't know. Like, if Nordrassil had been burned and the dragon soul had been taken to that new well on Hyjal, if that would have freed the old gods somehow through the Rift of Aln being under there and etc.
Yeah. I mean, there is that possibility of it, especially with, I mean, Yasiraj being the original blood, with that it's this whole reckoning of um being destined and intertwined with those things.
But I kind of wonder if the Twilight cultists are using Elementium, which is supposed to be a combination of all of the elements, potentially akin to all of the old god blood being combined together and amalgamated into this like perfect metal. I wonder what the purpose of that is. If it's a similar purpose to, Nefarian combining the powers of the different aspects, Deathwing combining the powers of them into the Dragon Soul. What is it about combining the Pantheon's individual powers into one, which would free them? I mean, I would venture to say that when the elemental planes were each segmented off, and then the Pantheon as a whole had their keepers imprison the old gods, it would only make sense to me that a really strong prison would be made by combining each of their powers, and that there's something from each of the titans that's holding the old gods there. And in some capacity, we're going to need all of that power combined for them to undo the prison.
With that borrowed power from all of the pantheon given to the aspects, maybe that's a key to unlocking the old gods prisons as well, as they fade away and die in like certain locations, etc.
Yeah, I was just thinking, you know how you said you take the demon soul or the dragon soul to the top of the well at the top of Mount Hyjal,
Yeah.
like under the tree. Yeah, that's where Thrall has his wedding, or his like declaration of like mateship or whatever it is with Agra, and the aspects are there. And if you go around and you click on them, they all have like individual things to say and whatnot there. But Nor's Dormu, when you click on him, he says yes. Then, like he says, your class, it's like things appear bleak, but know that even as things appear to unravel, they do so with greater purpose. And then, like underneath that, it says, despite his comforting words, Nor's Dormu looks stricken, if not ill. And I was thinking that maybe like that place does have some form of like connection or potential like just thinking in general like key openingness that and that's why Nor's Dormu is looking a bit sick or ill, like he's like not happy with what he's like seeing while he's standing there.
Which is probably why he didn't bless it. There's something about his future sight that's probably just giving him a sense of malaise, that he knows that it's not going to end well with the Well of Eternity being on Hyjal with Norgicil and everything.
Right.
I have a final question, just because I can't remember. Was the Dragon Soul actually created in the layer which Deathwing has underneath Hyjal? Like, is that where it was actually first made? Under Hyjal?
I missed that.
I'm asking if the Dragon Soul was first created from within Deathwing's lair beneath Hyjal. Is it, because Deathwing has a lot of layers, was it the one under Hyjal where the Dragon Soul is first made? Because that also could be a big red flag.
I don't really know. I do know that Deathwing did have a lair under Mount Hyjal. You used to be able to see it in the old instance of Mount Hyjal, but it's went missing from there. Like it used to have the opening similar to Anixi's lair. But it would be very, very interesting if that's like where it was made. Yeah.
I guess we might not know yet, but if we ever do see that layer, it'd be interesting if we find out that is where it was made to begin with.
Gizmo's saying he thinks the Dragon Soul was made under Wormrest.
Well, that is where they imbue it, but
You're right.
I meant the actual creation of the artifact.
Oh, right.
I mean, technically it becomes the Dragon Soul when the other aspects empower it, and that's at Wormrest, certainly. But the actual disc, the formation of the disc, I got the impression that it was created prior to them imbuing that at Wormrest, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, I think that kind of ties up the stream. I don't know if you guys had any lingering questions, but if you did, feel free to leave us a comment or come into our Discord and you can chat with us at any time and ask us some questions. We have a really big community of friends there who, you know, we chat with, and they're way like million times more brilliant than us, so like you could go pick their brains. But we do these streams every 2 weeks, the lore streams, every second Wednesday. So the next one is going to be on the 27th of June. It's going to be about the Scarlet Crusade and Archbishop Benedictus, so we'd love if you could tune in for that. But we're also starting now to do classic WoW discussion streams every other Wednesday as well, so the next one will be on the 20th of June. And we're going to be talking about classic WoW dungeons and, you know, kind of which dungeons to hit up, which ones you should skip, what's the benefits of going to each one. So if you guys are interested, tuning in for any of that, we'd love to see you there. Did you guys have anything that I missed? Anything to add? We're almost at 100 subscribers.
Yeah, we're getting real close to being really close to 100 and doing a giveaway for that as well too. It's been an amazing journey so far, and I'm really excited with the growth that we have. You guys have all been amazing, and we love all of our dedicated people that are always coming in and chatting with us. It's the best thing ever, and it makes my heart warm.
Yeah, we're like I think 7 away from 100 or something, and in 2 months or something, and we're only doing streams. Like that's amazing. We don't even have a video up yet. We are working on videos, by the way. If you want to hear, kind of what we're working on, but there will be videos. But like the 100 subs already, like that's gonna be amazing.
It's definitely great. I'm so excited.
Well, thank you all for coming, and we will catch you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.